I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe we are all self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with two friends and activists, Logan and Justina Adorno. Jamie is a digital creator and Justina is an actress, and they're both animal activists who use their voice platforms and skills to spread awareness about animal welfare, how it impacts us, and what each of us can do to make choices that are compassionate towards animals, each other, and the environment as a whole. I know so many of you, myself included, have upped our activism for causes that we care about, or even changed career paths to something that felt more meaningful to us in the last handful of years for one reason or another. And whether you do this kind of work outside of your day job on nights or weekends, or you're a part time or full time activist in some capacity, whether you work for a nonprofit or independently, activists tend to experience similar feelings and obstacles no matter what they're fighting for. And of course, they also experience deep fulfillment as well. It can feel incredible to do this kind of work, and it can also feel very isolating if you're surrounded by people who don't really understand or who are not even open to understanding your values or the work that you're doing. So, I'm personally a big fan of finding ways that are fun, simple, and just things that can become habitual to integrate into my day that can make an impact. It can be very easy to get overwhelmed and kind of get stuck in that all or nothing mindset when it comes to trying to make a difference. There's so many causes, there's so many potential ways to give back, there's so many different things to create, whatever it might be. But some of the time, that overwhelm can make us inactive to where we don't actually do anything at all for any of the causes that we care about. So I'm all about finding that one thing that each of us can do that fits into our lives in a way that is sustainable. So I wanted to talk to people who are activists in different ways, and hopefully this conversation offers up a variety of things to consider if you want to get more involved in supporting a cause that you care about, but you're just not sure where to start, or maybe you're feeling stuck with what you've been doing. There are so many ways you can connect, start a conversation, or encourage people to consider a new perspective. And it can be stuff that you already do or enjoy doing anyway. You don't have to become an entirely new person overnight with entirely new habits to make a difference. I think that's really what I want people to take away from this episode is that we can all be activists in some respect. Some people create something and other people support the thing that was created, and maybe they're inspired to create their own thing because of it, and so on. We all play a part, whether you're a creator, a consumer, a mix of both. All of it matters, and nothing is too small of a role to play when it comes to getting this kind of shit done. So, between all of us, we discussed several ways of doing just that, including writing, filmmaking, protesting, demonstrations, brand collaborations, events, content creation, conscious consumption. I mean, lots of different things. I also asked Justina and Jamie how they each got into activism, the logistics behind how they devote time to it, among other responsibilities, as well as burnout, self care, and the importance of community as an activist. So if you feel like you're just one person who can't make an impact, I hope this episode makes you realize that you absolutely can and encourages you to find your own sweet spot for what's meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be miserable or lonely to be an activist. It can be simple, it can be enjoyable, and it can really open you up to so many new connections, opportunities, and fulfillment, especially creative fulfillment that you wouldn't have otherwise. There are so many worthwhile causes to get involved in, and all of us doing a little something results in big shifts. All right, here's my chat with Jamie and Justina. When was the turning point for each of you where you decided that you weren't going to just focus on yourself as individuals, but you were actually going to kind of expand on things beyond yourself and dedicate yourself to activism, especially in a public way. Was there a certain moment? Was it gradual?
Sure, yeah. So this is a great question because I went vegan originally for the animals. That is first and foremost. That was why I changed my lifestyle. And I didn't become an activist till a few months into being vegan. And I think it's really easy for people just to, start off by, okay, let me figure out what products I like, how am I going to eat? Let me see what's in my closet. Is there leather in there? Like that's something that I think takes a little bit of time to adjust to. And then I realized, well, I'm really against this, right? But if I want to see it change, I have to do something about it. And so the first form of activism that I actually participated in was called the Cube of Truth, where it's with
Oh, yeah.
Anonymous for the Voiceless. And we stand in public places with TV screens that just show standard practices of what happens to animals in order for them to get to our plates. And the reason that I participated in this was because it's very peaceful and educational, and that's what changed me.
Mm.
So I have a cousin out in California that was organizing these cubes. So she took me, and I just remember standing there and looking at people's faces and looking at how they watched the footage and how it was affecting them. And I really felt like I'm going to change the world. And so I've changed my approach to activism in various ways. I still do the Cube of Truths, but now I also do disruptions. I make films. I have a podcast, and work on various things to do with like legislation and things like that.
Amazing. I love how you said it took you a few months to become an activist. Girl, it took me 6 years.
Right.
Okay, I have been slowly working up the courage, so that's pretty amazing. Justina, how about you? How'd you get started?
I felt the same way as soon as Jamie said. It took a few months. In 2018, when I was going through my closets, makeup, all that stuff, when I was on set as an actor working, I started to use activism off screen when it came to the hair products on set that was being used on me, and the makeup, and just educating the people around me in my field. And I built up the courage to do more speak outs and like collaborate with different organizations that raise awareness about what's going on. And one day I was asked to speak at a pig vigil. I'm a very emotional person,
Wow.
so when it comes to like in the nitty gritty activism world, I was very, very hesitant just because of my own emotional and mental health. But once I did it, I realized the power of community. So I was like, okay, I need to keep going. I need to be more courageous and fearless.
I was actually going to ask you about that, Justina, the fact that you're an actor, how these parts of you have kind of merged, or like the skill sets have merged. Like, have you used something that you learned in your acting career for being an activist? And also, when you are on set, and if you have to say, by the way, I don't wear animal skins or something, do people treat you differently? Like, how is that experience for you?
Yes, I've definitely felt that as soon as I were to bring up my moral stance, people definitely can instantly are like, oh, yeah, she's difficult. But in the beginning, I started to feel uncomfortable with that. But then I've never cared about people's opinions on the things that I really care about. But it's always in the back of my head. I feel like in the most recent years, since there was a strike in the entertainment industry, I kind of feel like because I've been more vocal about my activism, I have been judged and kind of ostracized a bit, because a lot of these organizations fund a lot of the entertainment industry. I've had to say, hey, can we make sure that this cake is vegan? And on set, it's been lovely. Everyone really, really listens and really, really cares. On set, it feels great. Like they even gave me a pair of Uggs one time on a set, and I was like, I'm not wearing that. And they brought me off-brand vegan ones, and I'm like, can we like just do that instead? Like, can
Right.
that just be the standard, unless someone is being outrageous and really needs animal skins on their feet? So it's been easy, but when I am not in the room, that's when I get nervous that because I have been sticking to my morals, I may be looked at as difficult, but so be it then.
Very interesting. Curious to know, you both seem to be very creative people. You create a lot of things, acting, all that stuff. When you first became very passionate about getting this out there, I bet you were flooded with ideas of how you could do it. Films, podcasts, books, content, like whatever, events. How do each of you make this work sustainable and also filter your ideas of like what needs to happen now and what can wait until later, or maybe that's somebody else's work to do?
That's difficult because there are so many avenues to jump into activism. It is overwhelming. And I think anyone who wants to be more active, you have to just start with like what you're gifted at. And I knew I was a talker. I could talk and I love the arts. And so like that was like the only way I could see myself consistently thriving in activism.
Yeah, so for
Makes
me,
sense.
I mean, I kind of went full force into activism, and I think it was a totally different very different tactics that I used in the beginning. It's like when you first become an activist, at least in my experience, you are so angry at what is happening to the animals, and you are trying to find any way to let people know about what's happening to them. And so I went to my first cube back in San Francisco, then I brought it back to New York, and I started doing cubes pretty much every week where I was just talking with people on the streets and showing the footage of what happens to animals. And from there, I met other activists that were like, Jamie, you got to come to this fur protest this weekend. We have a booth that we're setting up where we're going to give out some free plant-based meals. We have a vigil at a slaughterhouse that is happening, and we would love you to come. And that, I think, is what changed my life forever, because seeing these animals moments before they are about to be taken inside a violent place is, and feeling so helpless is an experience that those images really never leave your mind. And I think that that is what lit a fire underneath me as an activist, where I will do anything it takes to stop this from happening. And it's not even just that small little slaughterhouse that I went to and was going to for years. It's everywhere is the problem. It's happening to
Yeah.
billions and billions of animals. And so my approach at first was really aggressive. I would get so flustered and heated. And what was really hard was I was saving animals and then coming home to my parents' house and seeing their body parts in my fridge. And I would look at my family and be like, what is wrong with you? Like, why don't you understand this? I still, to this day, don't get how people, once you know the information, don't change. But that was so frustrating for me. And then you bring up how can we make activism sustainable? I realized that this anger inside of me is not going to be something where I can last in the long run. I have to do it in a way that is sustainable for me and also that's more effective. Because I think as activists, it's really important that we always look at what are the tactics we're doing and to then analyze the impact of it. Is the yelling at my dad and looking at him while I'm pouring his milk carton down the sink effective? Yeah, maybe it could be. It could be for some people, for sure. But in my case, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so bringing him to a lecture by Dr. Clapper or Neil Barnard or Dr. Greger, where he's now drawn in maybe from the health perspective, and then bringing him to an animal sanctuary, in my experience, has been more effective. So constantly analyzing the two and finding ways where we can make impact where our talents are. Justina is an actress. She loves to talk. She loves to engage with people. She's using that as activism. There's artists, musicians that are writing music about activism. And for me, like I am a producer and filmmaker. And so I use that to like work on national billboard campaigns to get an anti-dairy message out there. Things like that.
Yeah. Building community really helps because, like, if you can't show up, you can reach out to someone who you've bonded with and say, "Hey, can you go to this protest? I can't make it." Or, "Hey, the screening is premiering." We constantly do that with each other, and I think that's really helpful because it is exhausting, and burnout is real no matter what field you're in, especially this.
Yeah.
The community really does help with sustaining that.
Absolutely. No, this was very helpful to hear both of your answers because for me, I know that I get very guilty for not doing all of it, right? Like I should be at a protest. I need to go to my first vigil, but I don't know if I will survive that. Like all these
Right.
things, I should do this. And I had to really look at what am I already doing in my life and how can I kind of amplify that? I already have a podcast. I'm going to start shifting things a little bit there, right? I'm a writer, so how can I use my comedic writing skills for an organization I care about? I got a book deal. I said the book has to be fully plant-based, right? So it's like I'm doing things I would already have been doing, but I'm infusing this stuff with things that feel simple and fun for me, right? And I think
Exactly.
that's important because people can get so bogged down with thinking that they got to do everything, even the stuff that they don't think that they would do well at, or they think it'd be really hard. And it could just be finding your nook of this
Mhm.
very big space and doing that one
Mhm.
thing really well. Is there any more that you want to say about that, as far as have you had to let go of certain things that you don't think is for you in this space and focus on what you love, or do you feel like I'm going to get to everything at some point?
I'd love to add on to that. Yeah. So my approach, was very much like I was going to protest almost, I want to say, if not every weekend, like multiple times a month, as well as vigils, as well as going on podcasts and doing my own podcast. Every school assignment in college was about animal rights, so it was a lot, which it was good. And we were also doing a lot of grocery store disruptions, where we were going into grocery stores and like locking
She's like
down the
a
place.
couple of times a month. It's like every single day.
Okay, let's be real. It was every day, and so after I graduated college, I started working for a film company, an all vegan video production company. I actually met the director at an animal rights march. He came to a vigil at a slaughterhouse, made a film. It got over 20 million views. It went worldwide,
Wow.
international. It was amazing. It's called The Save Movement by Cave Light Films. Anyway, it shows an altercation between myself and the truck driver, and just like you see the animals and what's going on, and it's very emotional. But anyway, he's a very talented filmmaker. So he and I kept in touch, and he said, "Well, it's COVID, like everybody's in lockdown. Why don't you come and make a film with me? Like you can intern with me and learn, some skill sets." I had been studying film and editing and video production. I had internships in the entertainment industry. And so I said, "Oh my God, this would be great as like a first job kind of out of college. Let's work on something together." So we worked on a film together called The Fight to Ban Live Animal Wet Markets, which basically looked at everybody's pointing the finger at China and being like, China, it has disgusting wet markets there. And what we did was we looked at the wet markets in New York City, and there's over
Mhm.
80 of them. And we had
Oh, wow.
undercover investigations inside these places. And we were like, the next pandemic could very much break out on our soil. So,
Mhm.
that being said, he and I worked a lot together, and he came and filmed one of my anonymous for the voiceless outreach conversations with people in Washington Square Park. We came back, we looked at the footage and edited it, and we were like, this is sick, but there's something really funny here. Like, this is like, I think that we're onto something. And we created my YouTube channel, Jamie's Corner. And so that was a little bit of a shift in my activism from going to, protest after protest. I still go to a lot of
Mhm.
but it's something where I was like, wow, I can reach more people and maximize my impact by actually recording my conversations and putting them online.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
This is the first time in my life where sometimes I get the notion of feeling what having an imposter syndrome feels like. I'm like, whoa, I've always been so confident in like everything I've done. And when it comes to animal activism, I want to bring creativity more into that line. But sometimes it could be a little daunting because I'm like, wait, this is a completely different field. It's not acting, it's not storytelling. I am interested in this. I have a million ideas, but I hold myself back because I don't feel like I have enough professionalism or credibility in a completely different medium. So sometimes that holds me back. And I do often wonder if my whole working with networks is still in the cards for me sometimes. I'm like, okay, maybe I can't depend on these big networks like I used to, and I just have to go the independent route, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just completely unfair that by you having, I don't know, integrity, that you're seen as difficult, right? If you're speaking up for yourself or somebody else, you can easily get
That's crazy.
blacklisted in this industry. I have a question about the moment that changed your mind about being vegan?
Well, when I was 13, I saw a pig slaughterhouse truck on the highway, and that always stuck with me. And I think that was the first moment that I actually started associating food on my plate with an actual living animal. And
Ah.
it took me a few years. I mean, I came across slaughterhouse footage, I think on Facebook when I was like
Mm.
16, 17. And so I dipped my toes into being vegetarian, but I didn't actually go vegan until 2018, January 1st, where I did Veganuary. And the reason it took me so long was I think it was this like, I thought of veganism as a diet and I thought of it as something that was extreme. And I didn't fully understand what happened in the dairy and the egg industries. And when you actually think about what being vegan means, it's just simply a stance against the exploitation of animals. It's
Right.
just simply not wanting to abuse them. You don't actually have to love animals to feel that we shouldn't hurt them. How could something so widespread, everybody's doing it, everybody's eating them, be cruel and be so bad, if everybody else is doing it? And so there were a lot of factors, but I think the moment it really, really clicked with me, I had been, I went vegan. I did the month Veganuary thing, and they had sent me a few emails of like information with the dairy and egg industry. And it was really weird. So I wasn't an activist yet. I was just vegan. I was eating plant based. And a few months into being vegan, I was away and I was in Israel and I was at a market out there. And there was a protest, an animal rights protest. And I was out at like, there were bars in this market and I was with my friends and we had a few drinks and I saw this protest come through and I'm looking at the signs really closely. And on the signs, I couldn't read what the words meant or what they said because they were in Hebrew, but I saw a chicken with like its neck slaughter like cut and there was blood. And that was the moment I ended up joining the protest. I left my friends at the bar and I was like,
Wow.
I'm going with them. And that was the moment that I was like, I really think something clicked in me where I was like, I need to speak up. Like I knew what was happening to animals was wrong, but like, how do I change this? And yeah.
Okay, interesting. So you had to have several kind of introductions to it along the way, right? Over
Yeah.
some years. What about you, Justina?
I'd say so for myself as well. When I first went vegan, I kind of took on the motto of like, it's a journey. Um, and I started a little Instagram called Just in a Vegan Journey because similar to Jamie, since I was young, my love for animals was evident slowly but surely. When I was younger, I would get those, oh, that's chicken, it's okay. And I would have a meltdown, but was gaslit by my family and society that this was normal. There was a moment in Puerto Rico where my grandmother had rabbits delivered and my cousin kind of broke it down to me and I lost my mind and I refused to eat, but then went back into the system. And for me, in high school, I saw a documentary and I thought that was like the turning point for me. And during the process of trying to be vegetarian and getting rid of this old lifestyle, I realized I had an addiction to food. And it was guilt based. And it wasn't until I really faced that I had a severe, all over the place eating disorder in many different types. It wasn't until then that I said, you know what, I'm going to release this guilt, this weight, this unaccountability of what this food is doing to my mindset, my body, and my values. And veganism healed me. And there was a moment where I saw Jamie mentioned Facebook. She saw a video. I think social media really helped a lot of people because Jamie and I went vegan around the same year. I started in 2017, but then like something would happen and I'd eat some sushi. But in 2018, there was just like an overflow of like the truth on social media. And I started following, vegan activists or just vegan eaters, plant-based eaters. And someone posted a drawing of this guy on one side with a cat dog, and they had forks and knives. And then on the other side were cow, chicken, and pig. And I was already vegan. And I remember in that moment, I like literally hands to my face and just started bawling. And I was like, wow, I am putting more value to these dogs as opposed to these cows. And I do love them. And it was like a moment of me being like, wow, I'm specious as fuck and I can't do this anymore because that's not what's true for me. And I think leading by example is so important in society, and so many people aren't brave enough to do that. And we need to just encourage each other to be brave and step in that power of being the minority, you know?
Yeah. Thank you both for sharing all of that. For me, I had done the whole plant-based thing for like a year, and like when I was 25 or something, and did never looked into anything else. I just thought it was a fad diet that would help me get some abs for a while or whatever, right? So I went back to eating all the things, and it didn't click for me. I think it's just so different when people understand the animal welfare aspect, the environmental impact, all that stuff, but it gets in this category of, oh, it's just a diet. But
Right.
the around 2018, it was really an internal thing. I don't know what sparked it. I just decided to do deeper research into it. And
Mm,
but it took me 20 fucking years, which really sucks. I mean, my first
mm.
introduction was going to a vegan restaurant when I was 8 years old, and then I didn't really go vegan until 28. And I wish it didn't take that long. But then on the other hand, my parents went vegan like 5 years
Yeah.
ago. All they had to do,
Wow.
they watched one documentary and that was it. They were vegan
It
overnight. They
Wow.
watched
it's
Earthlings.
crazy. And that's
Wow.
why I really believe that, like, we just can't give up on people because there is an aha moment and it looks different for every single person.
It's
Mm,
totally hidden from us, you know? So, like,
right,
when you're out with your friends and everybody else is eating animals and it's like totally normalized, like, I could see how
Right.
somebody that's not constantly exposed to the footage could just close their eyes and just be like, well, me eating one bite of the chicken nugget's not going to make a difference. And it's not true because you're setting an example. You're normalizing it, and
Yeah.
your friends instead, you can be the change for them. And so I really do. I think that you're right, though. I think in a sense that when you connect to what is happening to the animals, and when you truly stand against their abuse and their exploitation, I don't know a lot of people that would go back from that.
right.
And I think that's really important, and that's why there's a big distinction between somebody that just eats plant based and somebody that's vegan.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the criticism piece of all this. Not only do vegans get a lot of shit, but you guys have also a platform, right? So it's like you're kind of in this influencer space, if you will, with platforms that you're also using it for activism. I would imagine that can attract like double the amount of criticism as maybe other platforms. How do you navigate that? Do you each have your own approach to how you handle those things? Is it similar? Is it different?
I mean, that type of criticism, I don't even care. Sometimes I would engage because I am an engager, but now I'm just like, go out of here. It just makes me realize how disturbed our world is. That's it. And I've already known that since I was very young. But yeah, criticism, I was born for it. I really don't care what people have to say. The most difficult thing when it comes to criticism, though, is coming from friends or family, that they're like, this is too much, or and I'm like, my goodness, I tell you everything and they still want me to stay quieter or to relax. That's the most difficult part. The trolls on the internet, Jamie and I, we laugh at them most of the time. We don't care.
Justina and I were
Yeah.
hanging out with her mom the other day, and her mom looks at me and she goes, "Oh God, you're worse than Justina."
I'm like, you see, Jamie's worse than me.
Well, I with the trolls, and when the comments come rolling in, I actually welcome them with open arms. And the reason is because I don't put out content for my own validation or to like
Right,
reach the same vegans. The reason
Right.
I put out the content is because I want to reach mainstream, and I want people that eat animals and people that are not yet vegan to engage with it. And so
right,
sometimes people will get defensive at first. And that
yeah,
personally is a lot better than somebody having no reaction at all, because there's
Right.
different stages to changing. And I remember before I
right.
went vegan, there was one time that I actually got into a little fight and got a little defensive with one of my friends. I was a pescatarian, and she had said to me, like, you call yourself an animal lover. I find it really weird that you still eat fish. And I was like arguing. I was like, it's different, like blah blah blah. And then I went vegetarian like a few weeks after that. But it's crazy to think that like some of the comments that roll in on my page are like the same 10 excuses. It's like the
Right.
same thing over and over again. And it shows
Yeah.
how brainwashed our
Yeah.
society is. But I think sometimes it can get a little frustrating because it's like over and over, and I feel like a broken record a little bit. But I try to just with each person that I engage with, treat it like it's the first time, treat it like it's a new conversation. And I think it is important when it comes to what we were talking about before, changing your approach to activism or how has it changed. I do feel that through my own self-care and healing that I've been able to have more compassion and empathy for those people as well. And instead of looking at them as an enemy, look at them like an ally. How can they help? How can they get involved? Maybe they're not yet vegan, but I can get them to come to a protest. Or maybe we can find common ground here, like we're all against factory farming, right? Then let's take it a
Right.
step further and just reel them in, you know?
Absolutely. I try not to lose hope because I was the biggest dick to vegans, and I'm like, if I could do it, I feel like there's a lot of people that are just on the brink, right? I made fun of vegans relentlessly. I thought they were
No.
extreme,
No.
ridiculous. I think I made my vegan friend cry one time. I mean, I was a fucking asshole. Okay. And now, and I've even been not a vegan on this podcast and then changed my mind openly.
What?
Right. And so it's like, and then my friends and family like forget that I was not vegan for 28 years. I'm like, do you remember when I lived off of ribs and I loved meat and dairy and eggs at every meal? Do you remember
Yeah.
that? Aren't you
Right.
curious about what has changed?
Yeah, what
Aren't you
Right.
changed?
curious? Do you remember when I used to say the same shit about vegans that you're saying to me? So that is
I
what's so
know.
weird to me is like people knew me before and they know me now and they're still unwilling to have the conversation with me or to look at any of the materials or do any research or watch any
Right.
documentary or footage, and it blows
Right.
my mind. That was more of a rant, not really a question, but
No, I feel that is the craziest part because I feel the same way. It's like I have like so many like the people that know me more than the people on the internet, they trust me, right? Like they trust that like if I say something, it's because I know. If I talk about something, it's because it's serious. So I'm like, what the hell? Is I was addicted. I was addicted. I used to savor the meat last.
yes.
I was not born this way.
Yeah, using humor and sometimes responding like sarcastically can help. I think like letting them know that they're not going to knock me off of my piece. And sometimes I'll just make fun of them. And, I'll say to my brother, like, all right, baby, you need your breast milk this morning, or just
Sure,
things like
sure.
that like jab them,
Yeah.
but like at the same time, keeping it a little light or with the comments section on my videos. I mean, I'll be like so original, like yawn, things like that, because it's just like where is my time valuable and useful? Okay.
Right.
Is it really is it more effective for me to like sit through and like argue with somebody that's like not open-minded at all for hours, or is it
Yeah.
more valuable for me to like have a conversation with somebody that's actually open-minded, willing to hear multiple different sides to an issue, engage in like, I don't know, some thought-provoking conversation, and to dedicate my time to that? I personally think that that's better, and that is where I'd like to spend more of my energy.
I feel very similarly now where I'm like, okay, I have to discern who's open to chatting about this and who's not and just accept that.
Yeah.
And I wish it was my friends and family, like all my friends and family, because I care about them, their health and all that stuff. But sometimes it's just strangers who are more willing, and I got to take what I can get, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think for me, before I transitioned into, plant-based eating and everything else, I just assumed I would be deprived. And that it wasn't even that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't disagree
too.
with vegans really. I didn't disagree
Right.
that I was doing some fucked up shit. It was just the fact that I thought I would have to be deprived all the time. And then when you realize, wait a minute, the food's incredible, you feel better, you're doing great things for animals and the planet and all these things, you're helping prevent infectious disease, all this stuff. I'm like, wait,
Right.
there's no loss to this.
Mhm.
I think people but it's still stuck in their head that they're going to be deprived in some way. But I'm like, I eat the same stuff I used to. It all tastes the same to me. It's just equally as delicious. Anything about that piece of this puzzle that you want to speak to?
I think that just goes to show how force-fed we are in society with marketing and advertisement. I mean, they stuff it down our throats. I'm like watching Dancing with the Stars, and every single commercial, it's about burgers. And I think what's scary for people, once they find out that they don't need cow's milk, they don't need all these things that our government is screaming at us that we need, I probably shouldn't trust them on anything. And that is a complete, like, mind-blowing concept that people are not ready to accept, because it will change your life.
It's this mindset shift of realizing that these products were never ours to take in the first place. And so it's not a sacrifice. It's simply aligning the morals that most of us have with our actions. So as you said, if I could get everything that gives me taste satisfaction, that is healthy enough for me to survive and live, that causes less suffering to animals, it's better for the planet. It's like, why would I not choose that option?
Yeah.
And so I think the meat and dairy industry do a really, really good job with their advertising, and they make things look like they're all fine and dandy. You see happy cows and happy pigs and free range chickens and all this shit. And what the point is at the end of the day is that if there's a profit, there's a problem. And that at the end of the day, all these animals lose their lives, no matter how they were kept beforehand. 99% of them are factory farmed. It's simply realizing that they're not our product to take in the first place. And I don't feel that it's a sacrifice at all. If anything, I eat more foods than I used to.
I know, it's so funny when people are like, wait, it's so restrictive. I'm like, you eat the same 3 fucking ingredients at every meal, and what I eat is restrictive. I tried mung beans yesterday. Have you ever heard of that? I wish if I could go back in time and tell a younger version of myself in the kind of beginning phase, because I thought it was so hard. It's almost like the thought that it was hard was making it feel hard. I wish I could say it's literally as simple as changing your laundry detergent and buying a different brand at the grocery store. Like, I was going to the same stores and the same restaurants, and I was just like going to the same grocery store and then walking 2 feet in a different direction and buying something that looked like the meat I was buying. I mean, I just didn't realize, and people aren't looking for solutions or options. So is there anything that you wish you could have told yourself in the beginning, whether before you made that change or when you felt like it was really difficult to do so?
I keep the why I'm vegan in mind, and then the how naturally follows. So I think just in general, advice would be to find other like-minded people and to learn from them. I mean, I can't say that I cook a lot or that I have like a favorite recipe. It like all just seems so natural. Like I can't imagine my life before this almost.
Yeah.
Right? So I think in terms of like makeup, for example, I'll just look up like, okay, what are some cruelty-free and vegan makeup products? And then I just kind of stick to the brands that I like. So like next time, if somebody's listening to this and they're trying to make the transition, next time you go into the supermarket, instead of reaching for the cow butter, simply reach for the butter that says plant-based. Earth Balance is great. Miyoko's is another one of my favorite. Just reach for that one. If you are now in the milk aisle, okay, instead of reaching for the cow milk, like reach for, you have so many options: almond, oat, hemp, rice, soy milk, and try the different ones out. If there's a plant-based product you don't like, don't write off veganism. Like everything is bad. Like give it a shot and try different things. Okay. There's some vegan cheeses I admit that I don't like, but there's some that are like unbelievable and amazing. But it's not a diet. It's not about that. It's just simply not consuming products or anything that comes from animals.
I would tell my younger self that it's so important to create boundaries and stick to them, but not allowing outside voices to make you doubt your own intuition. I would tell myself that.
Yeah. The pushback I was hearing against people who cared about animals was like, oh, you care about more about animals than you do about humans.
Why? I always say to people, why do you have to pick and choose one over the other? Like it's not that scenario. We're not here saying, okay, there's a dog and a baby, pick one. That's not the scenario. It's simply like you can like not pay to have animals killed and murdered and abused, and you can also advocate for any other social justice issue you want to advocate for.
They just people like to detour the whole point. And for me, that's why I challenged them back with my answer. Did you forget that you're also an animal?
Well, that's
we're all animals.
Yeah. Humans put themselves in a different category for sure. Why can't we care about everyone. You're like asking a parent who has 3 kids that they can only give a shit about 1 kid. It's like, why can't we care about all the issues, right? Like, I care about
I used
everybody,
to ask my
right?
mom that question all the time. I used to be like, if it was me and my brother, who would you choose? I used to make her. I'm like, make a choice, make a choice.
There was just certain things that I had never even heard that all of a sudden was being directed at me, like, oh, veganism is only for, white people or elites or people who can afford to be vegan. Like, I mean, how do you respond to a lot of that stuff?
Well, when I first went vegan, I literally had no money to my name. I had nothing. I had nothing. And I was really hustling with acting. I got a job at a vegan restaurant because I was like, okay, at least maybe I could get free food or discounted food. And I just went back to the basics of what my family used to make, which is rice, beans, plantains with cilantro, potatoes, and I started to learn how to cook for myself, which I never thought I would do. I was never a cook before. I used to make smoothies. I was lucky that I loved fruits and vegetables growing up, no matter what. And so, like, it's just, it's insulting to say that it's only a rich white people thing, but it's obviously not a white privilege thing. It's not a race thing. It's a system thing.
Any race is able to care about animals, and I think it's actually it's almost insulting to say otherwise. And
Right.
I think that there's a great film that everybody should watch. It's called They're Trying to Kill Us. And it talks about how, yes, this is a systematic issue that when you go into poorer neighborhoods, there's fast food places all over the joint. And it's like, well, that is something that we absolutely need to change. And we need to make healthy plant-based food accessible to all communities for sure.
Right.
But how do we do that? Do we just continue on with the system and be like, oh, well, this is what's here, so this is what I'm going to eat? It's like, no, absolutely not. That's part of the problem. But when we also speak of racism and systematic issues, you have to look at who's killing the animals, who's working in the slaughterhouses, who's also living in the surrounding areas of these factory farms. I can tell you right now, they're not located on Park Avenue. Like,
Right.
oftentimes minorities are the ones that are affected the most by animal
Right.
agriculture. And so if we want to make it a race thing, then absolutely that's more of a reason to go vegan.
Yeah, it sucks. That part really, really sucks. And it breaks my heart because I didn't come from a lot of money. And I am self-made and my parents very much cared about me. And I knew that health was a huge, huge issue in my family. It wasn't something that was like, oh, it's hereditary. No, these are passed down habits that we're clinging on to by labeling it as culture. And it breaks my heart for people who are really struggling when they have larger families, very, very low income, and are literally living paycheck to paycheck. I'm glad that you brought up a documentary, Jamie, because the one that really like hit me was the smell of money. This is the biggest issue for me. It's like we need to educate our people, all of our people. There's white people in low income areas. Like, it's all of us. It's all of us.
All great points. I know I'm really grateful that the people who tune into this podcast, they care, they want to contribute, they care
Right.
about things in their community and doing some good work in the world. We all saw a lot of transitions during the pandemic, post-pandemic, of people needing to do meaningful work, including myself,
Right.
that left their jobs and all of that. Becoming an activist and actually getting paid for it, there's some options, right? You can try to work at a nonprofit or, some organization that you care about. But I love the fact that this space, this merging of being an influencer and being an activist is an option now. And I'd love to chat with you guys a little bit about how the logistics of being able to do this work and also pay your bills and what is involved kind of behind the scenes. Do you have to have other jobs in order to do it? Are you able to pay your bills with things like Patreon or, anything like that? What if somebody really wants to be a part-time or full-time activist? What does that actually look like?
So I recently just transitioned to being a full-time activist. Before, up until this point, I was working few different jobs, and I also worked for this organization called Generation Vegan. I was their marketing manager there, so I ran the social media on top of the other activism that I was doing outside of that. And so figuring out, okay, how can I now focus on my street style content and disruptions and undercover investigations. Now, how can I do that full time? And what I've found is that by partnering, number one, with other organizations, so sometimes an organization will hire me to actually show some of their undercover footage on the streets, and I'll speak to people about it. That's like one way. Another way is applying for grants. Another way is like I'm an ambassador for Generation Vegan, so that also helps. The podcast, Patreon. So that's like, all together, it's something that's doable, but it's certainly not like a let's get rich here kind of thing. And the more money that I'm able to come in, the more I'm able to do and give back kind of thing. So it is, it's a constant, I think, struggle in our movement that like the animal rights movement is funded the least out of every single nonprofit and organization that's out there when it comes to like human rights. And even when you look at like dogs and cat organizations, like they don't get much funding, but they still have a lot more than funding for pigs, cows, chickens, turkeys, and fish.
This is tricky because I'm grateful that I have been, somewhat successful with my acting career. But when it comes to activism and making money, I'm trying to figure that out because I don't like to ask people for money. Even if I'm like doing a film, I'm about to set up an account to ask for donations, and I feel awful because I'd rather have that money go directly to the animals, directly to food, not even the organization. Like I still feel uncomfortable donating to organizations. I'd rather say, what is your wish list? I will buy all these PP pads. I will buy all this food. So it is tricky when it comes to activism because a lot of the time, even as artists, you're asked, hey, it's for the animals for free, and like, at first I'm like, yeah, I would love to do this. But when I think about, hey, this is becoming my biggest passion. How do I transition into doing this full time? That is really tricky unless you are in the influencing world and like your thing is only makeup and maybe you get paid for makeup brands. But like Jamie said, you're not getting rich out here. And like the economy is just getting worse and worse and everything is even more expensive. So that is probably another thing that keeps people from like diving in and like really committing to the game because unfortunately doing good doesn't come with getting paid good. Like you can be selling the most disgusting product or working for the most incriminating organization and be getting paid bank, right? Now, when it comes to being morally like aligned, it's such a weird thing, right? You won't get paid anything or just enough to get by. So it's very, very tricky. That's why we need to all come together. And it circles back to what we were talking about earlier as a community to figure out how we can get into these bigger, popular, more funding situations and give all of our different talents and gifts to create something that can be profitable, that we can get paid and also give back to the animals. It's just a big flawed system, not to be pessimistic, but it is difficult. But yeah, I will say it is very fulfilling though. It is fulfilling. I feel so much stronger in who I am, knowing that I am doing a thankless job, even if that means like stopping and talking to people on the street like Jamie does, without a camera, without a YouTube channel. And I'm just doing it to try to save a couple of lives,
Sounds like you just got to find the right balance for yourself. And I'm glad that it's at least an option now that you can kind of get paid independently. It doesn't always have to be through somebody else's organization or business.
Right.
People can do that. But again, even if you do make good money, you usually just want to give that back out. I'm curious to know what kind of like self-care habits, whether you do stuff daily that helps you stay grounded with this work or things that you just pull out of your pocket as needed when things get real dark. What kind of stuff do you do?
For me, exercise, meditation comes in handy. I practice a lot of yoga. And at first I thought of it just more of as an exercise, but it's become a lot more of a spiritual practice for me. And I talk extensively about this like on my podcast and a few other people's podcasts. I practice Jivamukti yoga, and it's a vegan yoga global community, and they practice ahimsa, non-violence, non-harming, and some of the mantras and prayers that they say, it's like for peace for all living beings. And so I've found that yoga really begins off the mat. It's like being able to be more mindful about situations and to pause and can calm down. I can stay calm better. So there's a lot of benefits to it that I've experienced when it comes to helping me be able to do the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy helps too.
Yes.
Self-care, it's so essential, and it's something that I learned in acting school was just you can't have one thing be your whole identity. And I've always loved animals, so that would always stay a part of me. And part of my self-care is to remove myself sometimes and be able to say, I can't do this, or I'm not going to do this. And just use my vegan face mask stuff and just stay home and like be with my kitties. Or like if I'm able to go to an animal sanctuary, that's also very healing and still supportive in the movement. And crying, just crying it out. Sometimes I just have to like watch a sad documentary and allow myself to feel the feelings because they're real, and let them be released, because keeping everything in is really not healthy for you as well. And yeah, just talk about it to your friends, when you're feeling low. You have to figure out who you are, what you love, and tap into that. Reach out to the people that love you and do understand you, because self-care is it's a non-stop job, no matter what, activist or not. It's very, very important. And sleep. You gotta sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. My very last question for you both. I'm dying to know how you feel about this. So, when we look back at history, every social justice movement of any kind, the people at the very beginning were called radicals, ridiculous, a threat to the Constitution, right? Basically, before the majority of people kind of woke up, right? So, we look back at all these things and we are so grateful that people did those things, changed the game, fought for rights. Yet, people seem to be very unwilling to look at present day and ask, what are we doing now that future generations are going to look back and be appalled by? What do you think is going on, and what do you think would open people up a little bit to ask themselves, would I have been the person that stood up for something, or would I not? Like people like to think that they would have done the thing, but the
Yeah.
best way to look at it is, what are you doing now, right? So anything that you want to share about that concept, that really blows my mind that people can't make that connection.
I always tell people that actually. I'm like, we really need change, right? And you can be the change. Literally today in your life, without telling anybody about it, you can be a game changer. And I recently saw the musical Suffs on Broadway, which was about the women's rights movement and about how there were like four women who would go to Washington, D.C. at the White House with posters chanting. At some point, they were locked up, they were starved, they were put into confinement. And now we look at them as heroes. And it's like, we have to remember it takes a certain level of disruption in order to make a change. Whether you're Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, different approaches, it doesn't matter. Showing up is so vital. And it could be as simple as just not even speaking, just showing up to a march. It's I want people to get their power back and remember they could be a part of history. And like that keeps me going sometimes. I'm like, you know what? If I ever have kids, or if my brother has kids, or my cousins' kids when they get older, I am going to be so happy that they knew that I didn't care to be an outsider and I stood up for the animals, because we're going to look back and be ashamed of ourselves. And I wish that everyone could just be on the kind side of the line. We have the information, we have technology, we have so many options to be a part of the movement. There's just no excuse.
Not only this, but how urgent would you want someone to change if you were the victim? So like, yeah, we could talk about what would you have been doing 1,000 years ago? Would you have been putting yourself on the line? That's one question to ask, but like, I don't want you to take baby steps. You're not a baby. You're an adult. Like, no, baby steps are for babies. Like it's as simple as looking at this issue like you would any other social justice issue. It's a matter of looking at it like you wouldn't be a little bit homophobic, you wouldn't be a little bit racist, and you shouldn't be a little bit against animal cruelty. You should be against it all of the time. And so that is what veganism is. And I really, really think that like together we can be that much more powerful. When you become so aware of what's happening with the animals and when you research it, you know that you're not wrong and you're very confident in your approach. And being that all three of us were on the other side, we saw where these people are coming from, and we allowed ourselves to be open-minded and learn new information and change.
That's what every rights movement looks like. Everyone thinks you're crazy, radical, extreme, until the change happens. And then we wake up and we're like, whoa, what were we thinking? And it's like, please, everyone, wake up right now.
Don't be the great grandparent that your ancestors are appalled by. How about that? Try that out. Thank you both so much. Where can people find you, your work, all that good stuff? Where do you want to send people to?
Thank you so much, Delanie. This was really awesome. You can find me at It's Jamie's Corner on Instagram, ITS Jamie's Corner, or just go to itsjamiescorner.com. Shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from anybody that listened to this and hopefully helped you get more active. That would be really cool.
Yes. Thank you, Delanie. I'm so proud of you. We need you. And I am happy to have had this conversation with you. And hopefully we can collaborate since you're a writer and you're a funny gal.
Hey, I'd love to.
Yes. You can find me at Justina on Instagram.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Hope this gave you some ideas or just helped you feel less alone in your own activism. Also, getting involved could be as easy as something like joining an email list for an organization that you care about. And when they send out action alert type of emails, you click a button to support what they're doing. I mean, everything is automated these days where you can literally click a button and it sends a letter to a legislator somewhere. You didn't even have to write it or make a phone call or anything. It's prepared for you. It's done for you. So again, it doesn't have to be this all or nothing mindset where either you change your whole life or you do nothing. I really want to push back on that narrative. Think about where you're already spending time in your day. If you're already spending time on social media every day, what if you took 1 minute of your time to leave a positive comment on an organization you care about's post or something? Because even if it's literally liking a post on Instagram or sharing something on TikTok or whatever it is, that all helps and adds up. We can all take a tiny daily action of some kind that doesn't have to be an inconvenience to us, that doesn't have to feel like we're depriving ourselves of things that we enjoy. It can really be such a simple little thing. And just to wrap up, if you're involved in a cause that you don't see talked about much and you think needs more visibility around it, please write into selfhelplesspodcast@gmail.com. I would love to help spread awareness and have a discussion with you about it. Of course, we get tons of submissions, so I'm not able to get to everybody, or at least not all at once, but I do make a conscious effort to have activists on the show regularly. All right, everybody, you're super awesome. Love you all, and talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to Self-Helpless. You can find our brand new merch, Patreon community, and other fun goodies at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you left an Apple Podcast review, shared this episode with a friend, or post about it on Instagram and tag us at Self-Helpless Podcast so we could repost you and say hi. As an independently produced show, we sincerely appreciate your support. Thanks, everybody.